Welcome. In this lecture, we're going to talk about intercultural communication. Now, if you live in South Florida, you already know that we are a very interculturally aware society. And so let's talk about it, shall we? So why is intercultural communication? Why does it matter? So it matters because as you find yourself going into the workplace, you'll realize that in many cases, especially in the business world, you'll need to understand different cultures. You'll find that you'll have global connections. And this certainly permeates the workplaces, classrooms, and our communities. And also builds respect and understanding and collaboration. And whether you're in the healthcare field, aviation, whatever area you are going to be going into your own business, let's say, you are still going to need to understand intercultural communication. It prevents miscommunication and it prevents conflict because of miscommunication. So an example provided is the different expectations for eye contact. Maybe in your household, you cannot take a look in your father's eyes or your mother's eyes too long because it's considered disrespectful. In other cultures, it's fine. So it certainly has to do with cultures. And so let's define culture. Culture is a shared belief, values, customs, and behaviors. It's passed through communication, many times through verbal communication, but sometimes it's passed through nonverbal communication too. Think about how sometimes you find yourself making the same body language gestures as maybe your parent or your sibling. And it shapes interpretation of messages. So here's an example. An individual success in the US, so in the cultural norms of the US, it is essential to have individual success. However, in more collectivist societies, and Japan is used in your textbook, then it's more about group harmony or more of a collective success than an individualistic success. So intercultural communication can be defined as an exchange of messages between people from different cultural backgrounds. And then the goal is to build understanding despite differences. But it requires adaptability, empathy, and open-mindedness. So Hofstede's model suggests that individualism versus collectivism is self versus the group. Then there's high versus low power distance, acceptance of inequality, high versus low uncertainty avoidance, which is you risk comfort, masculinity versus femininity, which is competitive versus cooperative. Now, this is from your textbook. And then an example is, let's say, maybe the difference between the US and Mexico in terms of cultural differences. And if you or your family were born or raised someplace else, you too may see the difference between cultural differences in the broader society and what happens in your household. So your textbook talks about high context versus low context cultures. What does this mean? High context means, or it relies on relationships, nonverbals. Take a look at the picture where one person is bowing to the other. That is a nonverbal cue that happens in many countries. The textbook again uses Japan, and we know that's true. We see it in Japanese films and movies. Whereas the low context meaning, which is explicit in words, is in the US. So it's face to face, contact, direct eye contact, respect for individuals on an individualistic level. So there are barriers to intercultural communication, and we talked about stereotypes, and we're going to talk about them again. And that's where we assume that if somebody's from another culture, and we have certain preconceived notions about them, then we assume that everybody is that. And then we have prejudices, where we have negative feelings towards certain groups. Or we have what's called ethnocentrism, and this is where one believes that one culture is superior to another culture. And then we have differences in languages such as slang, idioms, and translation. And translating those slangs or idiom might be barriers to communication. Think about an older person and a younger person and the slangs that both use that are not current in each other. So at your age, you may use slangs that communicate well with your peers, but maybe not with your grandparents. So we have what's called intercultural competence, and this is kind of where you want to get to. It's an ability to communicate effectively across cultures. It's knowledge, it's learning about other cultures and wanting to know about other cultures. It's motivation, it's a desire to connect. And then you got to develop skills of adapting, being adaptive, to listening, to empathizing. And so if you get out there once you're finished with college and you want to go into business, and it's not just in business, it's in education, it's in the medical field, global business and global teamwork that comprise of people from different ethnicities and different cultures are definitely going to exist. And they're going to exist more as the generations age. So we have some strategies for success. Be open-minded. Avoid assumptions. Ask questions. Practice active listening. Use inclusive language. And adapt to your audience's style. If your audience might be a different culture from you, think about what they might need from you and try and provide it, even if it's different than something that you might be aware of. So what are some of the takeaways here? Culture shapes communication and interpretation. Misunderstandings arise from assuming sameness. Remember, different cultures are different, and we have to assume differences, not sameness. Intercultural competence means that you're aware, you're empathetic, and you're adaptable to other cultures. And finally, effective communicators build cultural bridges. I hope you got something out of this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.